Rain fell gently over Lagos, turning the glass walls of Okeke Towers into shimmering mirrors that reflected the gray afternoon sky. Hundreds of employees stood silently in the enormous lobby, all dressed in black. The usually lively headquarters of Okeke Agricultural Holdings had never been so quiet. The giant portrait of Chief David Okeke stood at the center of the room, surrounded by thousands of fresh white lilies. His warm smile seemed almost alive, making many of those gathered wonder if he would walk through the revolving doors at any moment, laughing in his usual booming voice. But everyone knew he never would. Nigeria had lost one of its most respected businessmen. The newspapers called him the farmer who built an empire. Television stations interrupted their regular broadcasts to honor him. Politicians praised his contributions to agriculture. Farmers across the country mourned the man who had transformed countless rural communities by giving them access to modern equipment, improved seeds, and fair markets. For millions, Chief David Okeke was a national hero. To one young woman standing quietly beside his portrait, he had simply been Dad. Amara Okeke stared at the framed photograph without blinking. She hadn't cried for hours. She had cried until there were no tears left. At only 23 years old, she suddenly felt much older. The funeral had ended only minutes ago, yet it already felt like the world had moved on without her. Employees whispered respectfully as they walked past. "Poor Miss Amara. She's all alone now. I can't imagine losing both parents so young." Someone else sighed. Chief David always said she was his greatest achievement. Amara heard every word, but none of it truly reached her. Everything around her sounded distant, as though she were underwater. She remembered the last conversation she had shared with her father only 3 nights before his heart attack. They had been sitting on the balcony of his Lagos mansion, watching the city lights stretch endlessly into the darkness. "You work too much," she had teased him. David chuckled. "I learned that from someone." She smiled. "I learned it from you." He had laughed so hard that evening. "If anything ever happens to me," he had said, "promise me one thing." She immediately frowned. "Nothing is going to happen. Promise me." She reluctantly nodded. "I promise. Never forget where we came from." She remembered rolling her eyes. "Dad, no matter how rich we become, never let money erase your heart." She had hugged him. "As if I could ever forget." Now those words echoed painfully inside her mind. Never forget where we came from. A lump formed in her throat. She wished she had known those would be among the last words he would ever speak to her. One by one, executives approached her. Their faces were filled with sympathy, but beneath that sympathy she could also see expectation. The chairman of the board, Mr. Ibrahim Musa, adjusted his glasses before speaking softly. "Miss Okeke." She turned toward him. "The board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow morning." She stared blankly. He continued carefully. "As the sole heir to your father's estate, everyone will be expecting your address." Another executive stepped forward. "The shareholders need reassurance. Our international partners have already begun calling. The media is asking who will become the next chief executive officer. Our expansion projects cannot remain on hold." Each sentence felt heavier than the last. She had barely buried her father. Already the world expected her to replace him. She nodded politely. "I understand." Mr. Musa offered a small smile. "Your father prepared you for this." She forced herself to return the smile. "I know." But deep inside, she knew she wasn't ready. Not today. Not tomorrow. Maybe not ever. That evening, the mansion felt unbearably empty. The house stretched across several acres in one of Lagos's most exclusive neighborhoods. There were marble staircases, crystal chandeliers imported from Italy, priceless artwork covering the walls, and enough bedrooms to accommodate dozens of guests. Yet, without her father's laughter, it felt colder than a prison. The dining table, designed to seat 20 people, held only one plate. Amara sat alone. A servant carefully placed her favorite meal before her. Jollof rice, grilled fish, plantains. She stared at it. I'm not hungry." The elderly housekeeper, Mama Bose, looked at her with concern. "You haven't eaten since yesterday." "I'll eat later. You always say that." Amara managed a weak smile. "I know." Mama Bose gently squeezed her shoulder before quietly leaving the room. Minutes later, the untouched food remained exactly where it had been placed. Amara slowly stood and wandered through the mansion. Every room reminded her of her father. His reading glasses still rested beside the study lamp. His favorite leather chair remained angled toward the fireplace. His unfinished crossword puzzle lay on the coffee table. His reading Bible remained open on the bedside cabinet. It was as though he had simply stepped outside and would return at any moment. She entered his office. The rich scent of polished mahogany and old books filled the room. On the wall hung dozens of photographs documenting the journey of the Okeke family. One picture caught her attention. It wasn't taken at a luxury event. It wasn't during a business award. It wasn't inside a mansion. It showed a tiny mud house surrounded by cassava fields. Standing outside were a much younger David Okeke, his late wife Grace, and a little girl wearing oversized slippers. The little girl held a basket almost as large as herself. Amara reached toward the photograph. She smiled through fresh tears. She remembered that day, before billions, before private jets, before luxury cars, before the world knew the Okeke name. Back then they had almost nothing. Her father had cultivated a small piece of rented land in a quiet village in Enugu State. Some seasons they harvested enough food. Some seasons they didn't. There were nights when dinner consisted of boiled cassava and palm oil because that was all they could afford. Yet somehow those were among the happiest years of her childhood. She remembered chasing butterflies across open fields, running barefoot after goats, fetching water from the stream with other village children, helping her mother roast corn, watching her father sing while planting yams beneath the hot afternoon sun. They had been poor, very poor, but they had been together. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the framed photograph from the wall. Taped behind it was a faded piece of paper, her father's handwriting. "Home is not where your money lives. Home is where your soul remembers peace." Amara closed her eyes. Her father had hidden that message where only someone looking closely would ever find it. Fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. "I miss you so much, Dad." Silence answered. For nearly an hour she sat alone in his office. Then something inside her settled. Not happiness, not acceptance, just clarity. She stood, walked to her bedroom, opened her wardrobe. Designer gowns filled one side. Luxury handbags occupied another. Rows of expensive shoes lined polished shelves. Diamond jewelry glittered beneath soft lighting. She looked at everything. None of it mattered anymore. She removed a small travel bag from the closet. Instead of filling it with expensive clothing, she chose simple jeans, plain t-shirts, an old sweater, rubber sandals, and a pair of worn work trousers she had once used during a charity farm visit. She packed quietly. She left behind every designer label, every expensive watch, every necklace, every symbol of wealth. When she finished, the bag looked as though it belonged to an ordinary traveler. She opened a drawer and took out a small envelope. Inside was cash, enough to survive comfortably for months without attracting attention. No credit cards, no platinum bank cards, no corporate identification. She picked up her phone. After staring at it for several seconds, she switched it off. Then she placed it inside the drawer. No one would be able to track her. No constant phone calls, no meetings, no interviews, no board members, nothing. She quietly wrote a short letter. To Mr. Ibrahim Musa. "I need time. Please don't look for me. Protect Father's company until I return. I trust you." She signed it simply, Amara. Nothing more. Just before dawn, while most of the household slept, Amara carried her small bag downstairs. The security guards outside were changing shifts. No one noticed her walking through the side gate. Instead of calling one of the family's luxury vehicles, she walked several streets away before hailing an ordinary commercial taxi. The driver glanced at her through the mirror. "Where to, madam?" She hesitated, then answered softly, Jibawu Bus Terminal. The driver nodded. As the taxi drove away, Okeke Mansion disappeared behind rows of flowering trees. Amara didn't look back. At the terminal, travelers hurried in every direction carrying sacks, baskets, and small suitcases. Nobody recognized the young billionaire standing among them. She bought a regular bus ticket to Enugu. No VIP section, no private security, no assistance, just another passenger. As the bus slowly pulled out of Lagos, the skyline faded into the distance. Glass skyscrapers gave way to highways. Highways gave way to forests. The noise of the city slowly disappeared. Amara rested her head against the window. For the first time in days, she breathed deeply. She didn't know how long she would stay away. She didn't know what awaited her in the little village where her father had once struggled to feed his family. She only knew one thing. The world believed Nigeria's youngest billionaire was preparing to take over one of the country's largest business empires. Instead, she was traveling toward a forgotten farming village in Enugu, carrying nothing more than a small bag, a broken heart, and the hope that somewhere among the red earth, cassava fields, and memories of her childhood, she might find the peace her father had wanted her to remember. Far behind her, as the morning sun rose over Lagos, executives arrived at Okeke Towers expecting to meet their new CEO. They had no idea that the woman they were searching for had already vanished. The morning sun stretched across the rolling hills of Enugu, painting the red earth with a warm golden glow. Dew clung to blades of grass, while birds sang from the tall palm trees that lined the narrow dirt road leading into Umidum village. A rusty commercial bus slowed to a stop beneath an old mango tree. The conductor slapped the side of the vehicle. Umidum, last stop. Passengers climbed down one after another, balancing sacks of cassava, baskets of vegetables, and tied bundles of clothing on their heads. Among them was a young woman carrying only a small brown travel bag. Amara Okeke stepped onto the familiar red soil and stood still. A gentle breeze brushed against her face. She closed her eyes. The scent of damp earth, firewood, and fresh cassava leaves filled the air. For the first time since her father's funeral, she felt something loosen inside her chest. Not happiness, not yet, but peace. She slowly opened her eyes and looked around. Very little had changed. The village still had the same winding footpaths she had raced along as a child. The same cluster of mud houses with rusted zinc roofs stood proudly despite the passing years. Women swept their compounds with handmade brooms. Children chased one another barefoot through the dusty streets. Goats wandered lazily between compounds while chickens scratched at the ground looking for grains. An elderly man pushed a wooden wheelbarrow overflowing with fresh yams. It felt as though time itself had forgotten this place. No one looked at her twice. To them, she was simply another traveler. Amara smiled faintly. She preferred it that way. She adjusted the strap of her bag and began walking. As she passed a small roadside stall, an elderly woman selling roasted corn called out, "My daughter! Fresh corn!" Amara stopped. The smoky aroma instantly carried her back to childhood. "How much?" 200 naira. She searched her pocket and handed over the money. The woman smiled warmly. "God bless you. You too, Mama." Amara bit into the roasted corn. It wasn't perfectly seasoned. Some parts were slightly burnt. Yet somehow it tasted better than any expensive meal she had eaten in Lagos. She continued walking. Her destination was a small abandoned farm on the outskirts of the village. It had once belonged to her late grandfather before poverty forced the family to leave. Her father had often spoken about it. "I'll buy it back someday," he used to say. But life had moved so quickly that he never did. Amara had quietly arranged the purchase months earlier through a lawyer without revealing her identity. No one in the village knew who the new owner was. After nearly 30 minutes of walking, she finally saw it. A small weathered cottage stood alone beside several overgrown acres of farmland. The wooden door hung crooked on its hinges. Grass reached almost to her knees. Wild vines climbed the cracked walls. The roof sagged dangerously in one corner. Anyone else would have seen a ruin. Amara saw home. She smiled softly. "This will do." She unlocked the front door with the key her lawyer had mailed weeks before. The hinges groaned loudly. Dust floated through the air as sunlight spilled into the tiny room. There wasn't much inside. An old wooden table, a broken chair, a faded woven mat, a clay water pot with cracks running through its sides. Cobwebs covered nearly every corner. She gently ran her fingers across the rough wooden wall. "I made it back, Dad." The silence that followed no longer felt painful. Felt comforting. She set down her bag, rolled up her sleeves, and got to work. By afternoon, sweat covered her forehead. She swept years of dust from the floor. She cleaned broken windows. She carried piles of rotten wood outside. She scrubbed every surface she could find. The work exhausted her, but it also distracted her from the grief that had consumed her since her father's death. For hours she thought about nothing except cleaning. When evening arrived, the little cottage looked far more welcoming. Still simple, still old, but livable. She stepped outside and admired the surrounding farmland. Tall grasses swayed gently in the breeze. Some sections had become overrun with weeds. Others still showed faint traces of old farming rows. She imagined what her father must have looked like decades earlier, standing in this very field with a hoe over his shoulder. A lump formed in her throat. "I'll bring it back to life," she whispered. The following morning began before sunrise. A rooster crowed loudly somewhere nearby. Amara tied her hair into a ponytail, changed into an old pair of work trousers and a plain t-shirt, then picked up a borrowed cutlass she had purchased from a nearby market. She began clearing the overgrown weeds. The work proved harder than she expected. Within an hour, her hands had developed painful blisters. Her shoulders ached. Sweat soaked through her clothes. Still, she refused to stop. Around mid-morning, several village women passed by carrying baskets balanced effortlessly on their heads. One of them slowed. She looked Amara up and down before whispering loudly enough for everyone to hear. "She must be the new girl." Another woman laughed. "Look at how she's holding that cutlass. She probably has never worked a farm before." More laughter followed. Amara simply smiled politely. "Good morning." None of them replied. They continued walking while shaking their heads. Amara sighed quietly and returned to clearing weeds. She had expected curiosity. She hadn't expected immediate judgment. By noon, the blazing sun had become almost unbearable. She decided to fetch water before continuing. An elderly neighbor had earlier pointed her toward the village stream. "The cleanest water comes from there," he had said. She picked up a plastic bucket and started down the narrow forest path. The trail wound between tall bamboo trees and thick vegetation. Sunlight filtered through the leaves above, creating dancing patches of light on the ground. Soon she heard the gentle sound of flowing water. The stream appeared exactly as she remembered from childhood. Crystal clear water flowed over smooth rocks. Several village women were already filling buckets while chatting happily. Some glanced at Amara. A few whispered. Others ignored her completely. She waited patiently for her turn. When she finally bent down to fill her bucket, her foot landed on a patch of slippery moss. Everything happened in an instant. Her balance disappeared. She slipped. The bucket flew from her hands. Splash! Cold water drenched her from head to toe as she landed awkwardly in the shallow stream. The women froze. For 1 second there was complete silence. Then laughter erupted. One woman covered her mouth. Another pointed openly. "I told you she doesn't know village life." Another laughed so hard she nearly dropped her own bucket. "City girl." Someone else clapped sarcastically. Maybe the stream wanted to welcome her. Amara slowly pushed herself upright. Her clothes clung to her body. Mud covered her hands. Her pride hurt far more than her bruised knee. She tried to smile despite the embarrassment. "I'm fine." No one moved to help her. Several women simply picked up their buckets and continued laughing as they walked away. One even shook her head. If she can't fetch water, how does she expect to survive farming? Soon only one person remained. A young woman with dark skin, kind eyes, and neatly braided hair hurried toward her. "Oh no!" She knelt immediately beside Amara. "Are you hurt?" Amara looked surprised. I think I'm all right. The young woman extended both hands. Come. Slowly. Amara accepted the help. The stranger carefully pulled her to her feet. She brushed mud from Amara's sleeves as though they had known each other for years. Can you stand? Yes. Does your ankle hurt? A little. The young woman frowned with concern. Sit on this rock. She guided Amara gently to a large flat stone near the stream. Then she picked up the fallen bucket, rinsed it carefully, and filled it with fresh water. Only after making sure everything was clean did she return. My name is Adiz. Amara smiled for what felt like the first genuine time in weeks. I'm Amara. It's nice to meet you. I'm sorry everyone laughed. Amara shrugged gently. It's all right. Adiz shook her head. No, it isn't. She looked back toward the path where the other women had disappeared. They shouldn't have treated you like that. Amara studied her face. There wasn't even the slightest hint of mockery. Only kindness. You were the only one who helped. Adiz smiled shyly. My parents taught me that when someone falls, you lift them before asking questions. Something about those words touched Amara deeply. And your parents? The smile faded. They passed away. I'm sorry. It happened years ago. Adiz forced another smile. I'm used to saying it now. Amara's heart tightened. You live alone? Adiz nodded. I have a little house near the eastern farms. What do you do? Anything. She laughed softly. I weed farms. I harvest cassava. I wash clothes. I pound yam. If someone needs help, I work. And if nobody hires me, she shrugged. I eat whatever I already have. Amara noticed how worn Adiz's sandals were. One strap had been stitched together several times. Her blouse had tiny patches carefully sewn into the fabric. Yet despite owning so little, she carried herself with remarkable dignity. As if sensing Amara's thoughts, Adiz smiled brightly. Come. Where? My house isn't far. You should wash those muddy clothes before going back. Oh, I couldn't trouble you. It's no trouble. Before Amara could protest again, Adiz had already lifted the heavy bucket onto her head with practiced ease. You carry that little bag. I'll carry the water. Amara stared at her. You've already helped enough. Adiz laughed. My grandmother always said kindness becomes lighter when two people carry it. They walked together along the narrow path, talking as though they had been friends for years. For the first time since losing her father, Amara wasn't thinking about board meetings, billionaire companies, inheritance papers, or overwhelming grief. She was simply walking beside a kind stranger through the quiet beauty of an Enugu village. Neither of them realized that this simple act of compassion beside a small village stream would become the beginning of a friendship powerful enough to change both of their lives forever. The friendship between Amara and Adiz grew naturally, as though fate had been waiting for the two young women to cross paths. Only 3 days had passed since they met at the stream, yet they had already settled into a comfortable routine. Every morning, Adiz stopped by Amara's little cottage carrying a cheerful smile and a simple greeting. Good morning, sleepy farmer. Amara laughed as she stepped outside with a hoe resting on her shoulder. I've been awake for an hour. Liar. I have. Then why is your hair still a mess? Amara rolled her eyes dramatically. Because unlike you, I don't wake up looking like a village princess. Adiz burst into laughter. Princess? Have you seen my house? The two women laughed together as they walked toward the farmland. For the first time since her father's death, laughter no longer felt unfamiliar to Amara. Came naturally. The little farm was slowly coming back to life. The weeds had almost completely disappeared. The old fence had been repaired using bamboo poles cut from the nearby forest. Together they had planted vegetables in neat rows. Cassava stems now stood proudly in freshly turned soil. Even though the work was exhausting, Amara welcomed every aching muscle. Each swing of the hoe seemed to chip away at the grief she had carried from Lagos. One afternoon, as they rested beneath a mango tree eating roasted groundnuts, Adiz looked at her curiously. You know. You don't act like someone who grew up poor. Amara's heart skipped. She forced herself to keep eating. What makes you say that? Adiz shrugged. You speak differently. I do. You pronounce some English words like people on television. Amara smiled nervously. My father liked education. Adiz nodded thoughtfully. And your hands? Amara instinctively looked down. They're getting rough now. They weren't when you arrived. I noticed. Amara laughed softly. I suppose that's true. Adiz tilted her head. Where were you before coming here? For a brief moment, Amara considered telling her everything. The billion-dollar company, the mansion, the private jet, the funeral, the inheritance. Instead, she quietly answered, I lived in Lagos. Doing what? I worked with my father. What kind of work? We were involved in farming. That much at least wasn't a lie. Adiz smiled. No wonder you wanted this land. Amara nodded. It reminds me of him. Adiz's expression softened immediately. You miss him. Every day. The conversation ended there. Neither woman needed more words. They both understood what it meant to lose family. Far away, inside the magnificent royal palace of Abanagu Kingdom, another young person carried responsibilities far greater than his age. Prince Chinedu Obiora stood on the palace balcony overlooking miles of green forests stretching beyond the kingdom. At 27 years old, he had become one of the most admired young royals in southeastern Nigeria. Tall, athletic, calm. His rich brown skin glowed beneath the morning sunlight. His neatly trimmed beard framed a handsome face marked more by kindness than arrogance. Unlike many princes who surrounded themselves with luxury, Chinedu preferred simplicity. He enjoyed horseback riding through villages. He knew many farmers by name. He often visited schools without announcing himself. His father frequently complained. King Obiora walked onto the balcony carrying a cup of tea. There you are. Chinedu smiled. Good morning, father. You've been avoiding breakfast. I wasn't hungry. The king sighed. I know exactly what's on your mind. You do. You want to disappear into another village. Chinedu chuckled. Perhaps. King Obiora shook his head. Sometimes I wonder whether I raised a prince or a wandering farmer. What's wrong with farmers? Nothing. The king smiled. But princes have duties. So do farmers. The old king laughed despite himself. You always have an answer. Chinedu walked beside his father. I just think people are easier to understand when they don't know who you are. The king studied his son carefully. Still disguising yourself? It keeps people honest. And dangerous. I can handle myself. King Obiora finally nodded. Just return before sunset this time. I will. Though both father and son knew that promise wasn't always kept. Later that morning, Chinedu changed into simple clothing. Instead of royal robes, he wore faded jeans, a plain brown shirt, and old sandals. Only his horse hinted that he wasn't an ordinary traveler. Even then, he often tied the horse outside villages to avoid attracting attention. His loyal palace guard, Emeka, frowned. Your Highness, for the 100th time, you shouldn't travel alone. I'm not alone. Emeka looked around. I don't see anyone. Chinedu smiled. I have God. The guard sighed dramatically. That answer never helps me. Within minutes, the prince disappeared down a dusty road leading toward neighboring villages. He had no destination in mind. He rarely did. He simply enjoyed observing ordinary life. Children running after goats. Women pounding yam. Old men telling stories beneath giant trees. These moments reminded him why leadership mattered. Power meant little if you forgot the people. Around noon, he reached Umidim village. He tied his horse beneath a large irako tree and continued on foot. The marketplace buzzed with activity. Women bargained loudly over tomatoes. Blacksmiths hammered glowing metal. Children chased one another between stalls. Nobody paid much attention to the young stranger walking quietly among them. Exactly how he preferred it. As he wandered farther from the marketplace, rhythmic sounds caught his attention. Thunk, thunk, thunk. Someone was using a hoe. Curious, He followed the sound toward a nearby farm. Hidden behind tall cassava plants, he stopped. A young woman worked alone beneath the blazing afternoon sun. Her clothes were simple: a faded blue blouse, dark work trousers, rubber sandals stained with red earth. Her long black hair had been tied into a loose ponytail. Sweat glistened across her forehead. Yet she never complained. She simply continued working. What caught Chinidu's attention wasn't her beauty, although she was undeniably beautiful. It was the way she treated an elderly farmer struggling nearby. The old man attempted to lift a heavy sack of cassava. He failed twice. Without hesitation, the young woman hurried over. "Baba, let me help." "Oh no, I can manage." She smiled warmly. "We'll carry it together." Together they lifted the sack. After placing it safely onto the wheelbarrow, she dusted off her hands. "There." The old man smiled gratefully. "God bless you, my daughter. And you too." She returned to her own farm without expecting thanks. Chinidu found himself smiling. Few people offered help without expecting recognition. He continued watching. A little boy suddenly wandered too close to a stubborn goat tied beneath a tree. The frightened animal jerked violently. The child stumbled backward. Before anyone else reacted, the young woman rushed forward. She gently pulled the little boy away. "Careful." The child nodded sheepishly. "Thank you." She simply smiled. No running near animals. Again she returned to work. No drama. No boasting. Just kindness. The prince couldn't explain why he remained standing there. Something about her peaceful nature fascinated him. Most people became nervous when strangers watched them. She seemed completely unaware. Or perhaps she simply didn't care. Nearby voices interrupted his thoughts. Two village women carrying baskets stopped beside the road. One whispered loudly, "That's the new girl. The one living in the abandoned cottage?" "Yes. I heard she came from Lagos." Another scoffed. "Probably failed in the city. I heard she doesn't even have family. Maybe that's why she came here." Both women laughed before continuing down the road. Chinidu frowned slightly. People often judged those they knew nothing about. He looked back toward the farm. The young woman hadn't heard the gossip. Or perhaps she had chosen to ignore it. Either way, her focus never changed. A few minutes later, another young woman approached carrying 2 calabashes filled with water. "Adiz," the farmer called happily. "I brought water. You always rescue me. You'd probably forget to drink if I didn't." The two friends laughed. Adiz handed her 1 calabash. "You've been working since sunrise. I lost track of time." "I know. You always do." They sat beneath a tree sharing roasted maize while talking quietly. From where he stood, Chinidu couldn't hear every word. But he noticed something. The newcomer smiled differently whenever she spoke to Adiz. Not the polite smile she gave strangers. A genuine smile. One that reached her eyes. Whoever she was, life had clearly wounded her. Yet she still chose kindness. The prince admired that. He turned to leave. There was no reason to interrupt them. As he stepped back onto the narrow path, fate intervened. His foot caught the edge of a loose branch. Crack! The sharp sound echoed through the quiet farm. Both young women turned immediately. Amara stood. "Who's there?" For a split second, Chinidu considered simply walking away. Instead, he stepped from behind the cassava plants with an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to frighten you." Adiz relaxed first. "Oh, I thought it was a wild animal." Chinidu chuckled. "Fortunately not." Amara looked at the unfamiliar young man. He appeared to be an ordinary traveler. His clothes were dusty. His smile was warm. His eyes, however, carried an unusual calmness, almost regal. "Can we help you?" she asked politely. "I was passing through. I heard someone working. I hope you don't mind." "Not at all." He glanced toward the flourishing field. "You've done impressive work." Amara looked around at the neat rows of crops. "It's still a long way from finished. Even so, you've brought life back to land many people abandoned." She smiled modestly. "I'm trying." Adiz grinned proudly. She's stubborn. I am not. You worked through yesterday's rain. I wanted to finish clearing the northern field. You almost caught a fever. Amara laughed. I survived. Chinedu found himself laughing with them. There was something refreshingly genuine about their friendship. No pretension. No competition. Just simple joy. My name is Chinedu, he said at last. Amara. She extended her hand. He shook it gently. At ease. The introductions were brief. Yet the moment lingered. For reasons neither of them understood, both Amara and Chinedu felt an unexpected sense of familiarity. As though they had met long before this afternoon. A breeze swept across the field, rustling the cassava leaves. Neither of them realized that a simple conversation between strangers in a quiet farm outside Umidam village had just set into motion events that would change not only their own lives but the future of the entire village. Watching from a distant path, hidden behind a line of palm trees, another pair of eyes had witnessed the encounter. A beautiful young woman dressed in colorful wrappers paused her walk home. Her name was Nkiru. She had spent years believing Prince Chinedu belonged to her future. She did not recognize him in his simple clothing, but she did recognize something else. The way he had looked at the newcomer. And for the first time in her life, a seed of jealousy quietly took root in her heart. The story of the handsome stranger who had stopped to speak with Amara spread through Umidam village much faster than either Amara or Adiz expected. By sunrise the following morning, old women were already discussing it while sweeping their compounds. Young men mentioned it at the village square. Children repeated exaggerated versions of the encounter as they chased one another through the dusty streets. As with every village rumor, each retelling added something new. I heard he was a wealthy trader from Nsukka. No, someone told me he owns hundreds of cows. My cousin said he came from the royal family in Abanagu. Impossible. Why would a prince wear ordinary clothes? Nobody knew the truth. Only Prince Chinedu did. Meanwhile, at the eastern side of the village, the woman everyone admired for her beauty stood before a polished mirror. Nkiru carefully adjusted the coral beads around her neck before studying her reflection once again. Her long dark hair had been braided into an elegant style. Her wrapper was freshly ironed. Gold earrings sparkled whenever sunlight touched them. She smiled. She had every reason to. Since childhood, people had praised her appearance. Whenever visitors came to Umidam village, someone inevitably said the same thing. Nkiru is the most beautiful young woman here. Even neighboring villages knew her name. Young men competed for her attention. Wealthy traders sent gifts to her father's house. One local government chairman had even proposed marriage the previous year. She rejected him. I will not marry an ordinary man, she had proudly declared. Her mother had laughed. Then who will you marry? Hiru had answered without hesitation. A prince. At first everyone assumed she was joking. But over the years it became clear she meant every word. She imagined herself dressed in expensive fabrics, living inside a palace, giving orders to servants, attending royal ceremonies. She believed beauty alone guaranteed such a future. Whenever Prince Chinedu occasionally visited nearby villages in disguise, she unknowingly crossed paths with him several times. She never realized who he truly was. Yet whenever she heard stories about the prince, his kindness, his wisdom, and his handsome appearance, she became even more convinced that destiny would somehow bring them together. Then Amara arrived. At first, Nkiru barely noticed the newcomer. Another young woman from Lagos trying to survive village life. Nothing more. But after hearing several women gossip about the handsome traveler smiling at Amara, something unpleasant settled inside her heart. Curiosity, then irritation. Finally, jealousy. Later that morning, Nkiru walked toward the stream carrying an empty clay pot. Several women were already gathered there. One of them noticed her immediately. Nkiru, come and hear today's news. Nkiru smiled politely. What happened now? The woman lowered her voice dramatically. That new girl, Amara? Yes. They say the handsome stranger spent nearly 30 minutes talking with her. Another woman nodded eagerly. They looked comfortable together. I even saw him smiling. Someone giggled. Maybe he likes her. The group laughed. Kiru forced herself to laugh too. Inside, however, her stomach tightened. Really? Yes. He completely ignored every other woman. One elderly woman shook her head. That girl is lucky. Another disagreed. Lucky? She's just pretending to be humble. I've noticed girls from the city. They know how to attract men. Kiru quietly filled her water pot. Without another word, she lifted it onto her head and walked away. The laughter behind her gradually faded. But the words remained. Maybe he likes her. She hated how much those 4 words bothered her. Across the village, Amara and Adiz continued repairing the little cottage. The leaking section of the roof needed replacing before the rainy season became heavier. Adiz climbed carefully onto a wooden ladder, while Amara handed bundles of dried palm leaves upward. Careful, Amara called. I am. The ladder is shaking. So am I. Both women laughed. You know, Adiz said while tying another bundle into place, I've never seen someone work this hard. Amara looked up. My father always believed work gives dignity. He was right. Adiz paused. I wish I had met him. Amara smiled sadly. You would have liked him. He sounds kind. He was. The kindest man I've ever known. A brief silence followed. Then Adiz climbed down. We're making progress. Amara looked proudly at the repaired roof. It already feels more like home. Before Adiz could reply, footsteps approached. 3 young women stood outside the fence. At the center was Nkiru. Her colorful wrapper looked almost too elegant for ordinary village life. Gold bracelets jingled softly as she folded her arms. Her smile appeared friendly. Her eyes did not. So, you must be the famous newcomer. Amara wiped her hands on a cloth. I'm Amara. I've seen you around. I'm Nkiru. I know. Adiz muttered quietly beneath her breath. Of course everyone knew who Nkiru was. Nkiru slowly looked around the cottage. What a charming little house. Amara nodded. I like it. Really? It looks ready to collapse. The other girls laughed. Adiz frowned. It isn't that bad. Nkiru ignored her. She looked back at Amara. I heard a handsome traveler visited you yesterday. He stopped by the farm. Only you. He spoke to both of us. Nkiru tilted her head. Interesting. Amara sensed something unusual in the conversation but chose to remain polite. He seemed like a kind person. Nkiru smiled. I'm sure he was. Her smile disappeared almost instantly. Just remember something. What? Visitors leave. They don't stay. Without waiting for a reply, she turned around and walked away. The 2 girls following her burst into quiet laughter. Amara watched them disappear down the path. What was that about? Adiz sighed. That was Nkiru being Nkiru. Over the next week, the small incidents continued. Whenever Amara visited the market, Nkiru somehow appeared nearby. Sometimes she made comments loud enough for others to hear. Oh dear! Someone forgot how to wash city clothes properly. Several women laughed. Another day, Amara was buying tomatoes when Nkiru casually remarked, I suppose poor harvests force people to eat less. Again laughter followed. Amara never responded. She simply paid for her vegetables and walked away. Her silence irritated Nkiru even more. She wanted arguments. She wanted tears. Instead, she received calm smiles. One afternoon, Adiz finally lost her patience. They were returning from the stream carrying buckets when Nkiru deliberately stepped into their path. My, the famous farmer. Amara smiled politely. Good afternoon. Nkiru looked at the muddy bucket. Does carrying water ever become easier? I'm learning. I'm surprised. I thought city girls hired servants. Adiz placed her bucket firmly on the ground. Enough. Nkiru slowly looked toward her. I'm speaking to Amara, and she's choosing not to answer. So now I'll answer. Nkiru laughed. The orphan has found her voice. Adiz's expression hardened. My parents may be gone, but they taught me respect. Nkiru stepped closer. Careful. You seem to forget who you're talking to. Adiz refused to move. No, I remember exactly who I'm talking to. Amara gently placed a hand on Adiz's shoulder. It's all right. No, it isn't. They keep insulting you. Amara smiled softly. If I answer every insult, I'll never have time to finish planting cassava. Even Kiru looked momentarily surprised. She had expected anger. Instead, she received humor. One elderly woman watching nearby chuckled. That girl has wisdom, Kiru noticed. Several people were no longer laughing with her. They were smiling at Amara. She hated it. Without another word, she spun around and walked away. Later that evening, Prince Chinidu returned to Umidim village. Once again dressed as an ordinary traveler, he wandered quietly through the marketplace. He had told himself he simply enjoyed visiting the village. Deep down, he knew another reason. He hoped to see Amara again. As he purchased roasted groundnuts from an elderly vendor, two women nearby began talking. That poor new girl. What happened? Nkiru embarrassed her again today. For what? The handsome traveler. The second woman sighed. Nkiru doesn't like competition. Chinidu frowned slightly. Competition. He thanked the vendor and continued walking. Soon he spotted Amara near a vegetable stall. She was helping an elderly widow gather onions that had spilled across the ground after her basket broke. Most shoppers simply walked past. Amara knelt without hesitation. One by one, she collected every onion before placing them carefully back into the basket. The old woman smiled gratefully. My daughter. Thank you. It's nothing. It is everything. Chinidu watched quietly. No audience. No applause. No expectation of reward. Just kindness. Again. Exactly as before. He found himself smiling. At that very moment, Nkiru appeared from another row of market stalls. She saw him. Although she still didn't recognize him as the prince, she immediately remembered the stranger from the farm. Then she noticed where he was looking. Not at her. At Amara. Her heart burned. She deliberately walked toward the vegetable stall. Oh, what a coincidence. Chinidu greeted her politely. Good evening. She smiled brightly. I didn't expect to see you again. I was just passing through. So am I. She positioned herself between him and Amara, hoping to block his view. Instead, Chinidu simply stepped slightly to the side and continued watching as Amara helped the elderly widow. The movement was small, almost unnoticeable, yet to Nkiru it felt like a slap. For the first time in years, someone had chosen to look past her beauty. She clenched her fists. As Amara finally stood and turned around, her eyes met Chinidu's. She smiled warmly. Hello. Hello. I didn't expect to see you again so soon. Neither did I. Their conversation lasted only a few moments. Yet it was enough. Enough for Nkiru to realize that every visit from this mysterious stranger drew him closer to the newcomer she had dismissed as insignificant. As the sun dipped below the hills surrounding Umidim village, Nkiru walked home alone. The admiration she had enjoyed for years no longer felt enough. She wanted something else now. She wanted the attention of the handsome stranger. And she was beginning to believe that as long as Amara remained in the village, she would never have it. By the time she reached her father's compound, jealousy had transformed into determination. If kindness had won the stranger's attention, then kindness would have to lose, no matter what it cost. Far across the village, unaware of the storm quietly gathering around her, Amara sat outside her little cottage with Adiz, watching the stars appear one by one above the Enugu sky. For the first time in many weeks, she felt at home. She had no idea that someone had already decided she did not belong. The first rays of dawn spread across Umidim village, bathing the rolling hills in soft shades of gold. A cool breeze carried the earthy scent of freshly harvested yams, roasted corn, and burning firewood through the quiet morning air. Unlike ordinary days, however, the village was already buzzing with excitement long before sunrise. Today was the harvest festival. It was the most important celebration of the year. Every family, regardless of wealth or status, took part in honoring the season's blessings. Farmers gave thanks for successful harvests. Elders offered prayers for another fruitful year. Children performed traditional dances, and neighboring communities traveled long distances to join the festivities. For many young men and women, the festival was also a chance to meet future husbands and wives. Colorful banners woven from palm leaves decorated the village entrance. Fresh flowers lined the pathway leading to the village square. Women pounded yam in giant wooden mortars while laughing together. Men erected large canopies using bamboo poles. Young boys carried wooden benches toward the square. Drummers tested their instruments, filling the air with energetic rhythms that echoed across the valley. Even the birds seemed louder than usual. Inside her little cottage, Amara folded a simple cream-colored wrapper onto her bed. Adiz walked in carrying another neatly folded outfit. "I brought this." Amara looked up. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." She unfolded the wrapper proudly. It was modest but beautiful, decorated with tiny embroidered flowers around the edges. "My mother made this years ago." Amara immediately shook her head. "I can't accept something so precious." Adiz smiled gently. "My mother always believed clothes become happier when they're worn." She placed the wrapper into Amara's hands. "And besides," she grinned mischievously, "you can't attend your first harvest festival looking like you're going to weed cassava." Amara laughed. "Is my farming outfit really that bad?" "It's terrible. I've grown attached to it." "Well, your farming clothes can stay home today." Amara looked down at the carefully stitched wrapper. It had clearly been repaired several times over the years. Yet every stitch had been sewn with love. She hugged Adiz tightly. "Thank you." Adiz smiled. "You deserve something beautiful." For a brief moment, Amara thought about the designer gowns hanging inside her wardrobe back in Lagos. Some had cost more than entire houses in the village. Yet none of them meant as much as the handmade wrapper now resting in her arms. It wasn't expensive. It was given with love, and that made it priceless. Across the village, excitement also filled Nkiru's family compound. 3 young women surrounded her as she sat before a mirror. One carefully braided her hair. Another adjusted coral beads around her neck. The third held up 2 expensive wrappers. "Which one?" "The red." "No, wear the gold." Nkiru studied herself silently. Finally, she pointed toward the rich gold-colored wrapper decorated with intricate embroidery. "That one." Her friends smiled knowingly. "You'll be the most beautiful woman at the festival." "As always." Another giggled. "And if that handsome traveler returns today." Nkiru's lips curved into a confident smile. "He'll finally notice the difference between a village queen and a girl who pretends to be one." The girls laughed together. Yet beneath her confidence, Nkiru's mind remained troubled. She couldn't stop thinking about the way the stranger had looked at Amara in the marketplace. Not once, twice. She had never experienced being ignored before. She didn't like the feeling. Not at all. At the royal palace, Prince Chinedu stood before his father. King Obiora adjusted the ceremonial staff resting beside his throne. "You're attending the harvest festival?" "Yes." "As a prince this time." Chinedu nodded. The king smiled knowingly. "So no disguises?" "Not today." The king chuckled. "I imagine the young women will be pleased." Chinedu laughed softly. "They'll be disappointed." "Why?" "Because I'm attending to honor the farmers." His father raised an eyebrow. "And not because of a certain young woman?" Chinedu paused. He smiled but didn't answer. The king noticed. "So there is someone." Chinedu looked away toward the palace gardens. "I've only met her twice. But I've never met anyone quite like her." King Obiora's expression softened. "Sometimes that's all it takes." By mid-morning, Umidum village had transformed into a sea of vibrant colors. Traditional drummers filled the square with energetic rhythms. Children danced joyfully around decorated yam pyramids. Smoke from roasting meat drifted lazily through the air. Visitors from neighboring communities crowded every pathway. Amara and Adiz entered the square together. The moment they appeared, several villagers turned to look. Not because Amara wore expensive clothing. She didn't. The simple cream wrapper suited her perfectly. Her natural elegance made even modest clothes appear graceful. An elderly woman smiled. "The new girl looks lovely." Another nodded. "Very lovely." Nearby, Nkiru heard them. Her smile faded almost instantly. She turned. For a brief second, she simply stared. Amara wasn't wearing jewelry. She wasn't dressed extravagantly. Yet somehow she looked radiant. That irritated Nkiru more than she cared to admit. "Let's go," she muttered to her friends. The village chief stepped onto the wooden platform. "My people," the crowd quieted. "We gather once again to thank God and our ancestors for another successful harvest." Cheers erupted. Traditional dancers entered the square. Their colorful costumes swirled beautifully as drums echoed across the village. Children clapped excitedly. Visitors applauded. Amara found herself smiling. She remembered attending this same festival as a little girl with her parents. Back then, her father had danced so enthusiastically that everyone laughed. She could almost hear his laughter again. Adiz noticed her expression. "You're thinking about him. My father loved festivals. I wish I had met him." "So do I." The celebrations continued throughout the afternoon. There were wrestling competitions, traditional music, storytelling by village elders, cooking contests, children's games. Everyone seemed happy. Everyone except Nkiru. Her attention remained fixed on the road leading into the village. She kept hoping the handsome traveler would return. Then, just as the sun began its slow descent across the sky, murmurs spread through the crowd. "The prince! The prince has arrived!" People immediately stepped aside. Prince Chinidu entered the square wearing elegant royal attire embroidered with gold thread. Traditional chiefs walked beside him. Royal guards followed several steps behind. Women bowed respectfully. Men lowered their heads. Children stared in admiration. Amara's eyes widened. "That's..." Adiz nodded. "The prince." She looked genuinely surprised. The traveler was the prince. Prince Chinidu's eyes searched the crowd. Dozens of young women smiled hopefully. Some adjusted their wrappers. Others waved shyly. He acknowledged everyone politely. Then his gaze stopped. On Amara. His face brightened with unmistakable warmth. Kiru noticed immediately. So did nearly everyone else. After greeting the village elders, Prince Chinidu politely excused himself. Ignoring countless admiring glances, he walked directly toward Amara and Adiz. Gasps spread through the crowd. "He knows her. When did that happen? They've met before?" Kiru felt her stomach tighten. Prince Chinidu smiled warmly. "Good afternoon." Amara bowed respectfully. "Your Highness." He laughed softly. "So now you know." "I had no idea. I prefer meeting people without titles." Adiz smiled. "That explains everything." The prince looked at Amara. "Are you enjoying the festival?" "Very much." "I'm glad." A brief silence followed before he extended his hand. "The next dance is beginning." He smiled gently. "Would you honor me?" The entire square seemed to stop breathing. Amara blinked. "Me? You?" She looked around nervously. Dozens of young women, including Kiru, watched in stunned silence. "I don't know." Adiz leaned closer and whispered, "If you don't go, you'll regret it." Amara laughed quietly. Finally she accepted his hand. "I'd be honored." The drummers changed rhythm. Prince Chinidu led Amara toward the center of the square. The crowd instinctively formed a circle around them. The traditional dance began. Neither of them tried to impress anyone. They simply enjoyed the music. Prince Chinidu smiled often. Amara laughed whenever she made a mistake. Their natural chemistry became impossible to ignore. Even elderly women watching nearby smiled. "They look good together." "They certainly do." "I've never seen His Highness smile like that." Those words reached Nkiru's ears. Something inside her snapped. Without thinking, she marched into the center of the dance circle. The drums gradually fell silent. Everyone turned toward her. She looked directly at Amara. "So, you've managed to fool everyone." Confused murmurs spread through the crowd. Amara frowned. What do you mean? Kiru folded her arms. You pretend to be humble. You pretend to be kind. But we all know why you're here. I don't understand. You're chasing the prince. The crowd gasped. Prince Chinidu's expression hardened. Kiru, she ignored him. You arrived here with nothing. And suddenly you're dancing with royalty? She laughed bitterly. Convenient. Amara remained calm. I never asked anyone to invite me. No? Then why are you always around him? Before Amara could answer, Adiz stepped forward. Because he chooses to speak to her. Kiru glared at the orphan. Stay out of this. I won't. You've insulted Amara enough. Kiru pointed accusingly. She's manipulating the prince. The village square fell completely silent. Every eye turned toward Prince Chinidu. He stepped forward slowly. His calm voice carried across the gathering. No. Everyone waited. I approached Amara, not the other way around. He looked directly at Nkiru. Kindness cannot be mistaken for manipulation. His words struck the crowd like thunder. Nkiru's face flushed with embarrassment. She had expected support. Instead, the prince himself had defended Amara. The silence became unbearable. Unable to think of another response, Nkiru turned abruptly and stormed away, pushing past the stunned crowd. Her friends hurried after her. The villagers whispered among themselves. Some pitied her. Others quietly shook their heads. The chief eventually signaled for the musicians to continue. The drums slowly resumed. The celebration carried on, but the mood had changed. People no longer looked at Amara as merely the mysterious newcomer from Lagos. They looked at her as the young woman who had earned the respect of the prince without asking for it. As the evening sky filled with brilliant shades of orange and purple, Prince Chinidu walked Amara and Adiz toward the edge of the village square. I'm sorry your day ended like that, he said quietly. Amara smiled gently. It wasn't your fault. I don't like seeing people treated unfairly. I'll be all right. He admired the calm strength in her voice. Most people would have defended themselves with anger. She had answered with dignity instead. As they reached the narrow footpath leading toward her cottage, Prince Chinidu paused. I hope this won't stop you from attending next year's festival. Amara smiled. I think I'll come. I'm glad. He bowed politely before returning toward the royal procession. Amara watched him leave. Adiz gently nudged her shoulder. You smiled. I did not. You absolutely did. Amara laughed. Maybe a little. Far away, hidden beneath the shadows of a large Irako tree, Nkiru watched the three of them from a distance. Tears of humiliation burned in her eyes. She had spent years believing beauty was enough to win any heart. But today, before the entire village, she had watched the prince choose kindness over beauty. As the drums echoed into the night, jealousy hardened into something far more dangerous. For Nkiru, this was no longer a rivalry. It had become a battle she refused to lose. More than 2 weeks had passed since Amara Okeke disappeared from Lagos. Across Nigeria, rumors spread faster than facts. Some newspapers claimed she had secretly traveled abroad. Others insisted she was negotiating a massive international business deal. Social media was filled with speculation. Young billionaire CEO vanishes after father's death. Where is Amara Okeke? Okeke Agricultural Holdings remains silent. Television stations replayed the same photographs of the young heiress, always dressed in elegant designer suits, standing beside business leaders, smiling confidently at corporate events. No one imagined that at that very moment, the woman they were searching for was kneeling in a cassava field in a quiet village in Enugu, her hands covered in red earth as she pulled weeds from between rows of growing vegetables. Inside the 42nd floor boardroom of Okeke Agricultural Holdings, the atmosphere was tense. The long mahogany table that once echoed with Chief David Okeke's booming voice now felt strangely empty. Around it sat the company's directors, senior executives, and legal advisors. At the head of the table was Chairman Ibrahim Musa. The 64-year-old businessman adjusted his glasses before looking around the room. We cannot continue like this. No one disagreed. Stacks of reports lay unopened before them. International contracts waited for signatures. Banks wanted confirmation of leadership. Foreign investors requested meetings. Yet the one person authorized to make the final decisions had vanished. The company's chief financial officer sighed heavily. Our partners in Brazil have postponed the soybean agreement. Another executive added, the Kenyan expansion project is now behind schedule. Our rice processing plant in Kaduna is waiting for approval. A younger director shook his head. Employees are beginning to panic. Silence settled over the room. Everyone knew the company remained financially strong. Chief David had built a stable empire. But without visible leadership, uncertainty was growing. Mr. Musa opened the envelope Amara had left behind. He had read it dozens of times already. Still, he unfolded it carefully. I need time. Please don't look for me. Protect Father's company until I return. I trust you. He looked around the table. I promised Chief David I would protect his daughter. He paused. And I intend to keep that promise. The company's legal advisor frowned. But shareholders won't wait forever. Mr. Musa nodded. I know. He stared thoughtfully through the boardroom's floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lagos. But I also know Amara. She won't abandon this company. She's grieving. Until she returns, we keep her father's dream alive. The board members slowly nodded. The meeting continued, though everyone's thoughts remained with the missing young billionaire. Hundreds of kilometers away, life followed a very different rhythm. Amara wiped sweat from her forehead as she examined the neat rows of vegetables growing beside her cottage. The once neglected farmland had transformed dramatically. Fresh green leaves covered the cassava stems. Tomatoes ripened beneath broad vines. Pepper plants stood proudly in organized rows. Even the elderly neighbors who had doubted her now admitted she had worked miracles. You've got good hands, old Baba Okoro remarked one morning. Amara laughed softly. I've had excellent teachers. He leaned on his walking stick. Who taught you? My father. The old man smiled. Then may God bless his soul. Amara's smile faded slightly. Amen. Nearby, Adiz carried 2 buckets of water toward the vegetable beds. You've been talking instead of working. Baba Okoro chuckled. The young lady scolds me now. You deserve it. He laughed again before continuing down the path. Once he disappeared, Adiz placed the buckets on the ground. I think he likes you. I like him too. He told everyone in the village your tomatoes are the healthiest he's seen in years. Amara looked at the flourishing crops. My father always said healthy soil rewards patient people. Adiz smiled. You quote him often. I don't want to forget his voice. The words lingered between them. Adiz quietly reached over and squeezed Amara's hand. You won't. That afternoon, Prince Chinedu rode into Umidum village once again. Unlike previous visits, he arrived openly in royal attire. Children immediately surrounded his horse. Your Highness! Welcome! The prince smiled warmly and greeted everyone by name whenever he could. He never believed royalty should create distance. As he approached the marketplace, several elders bowed respectfully. Village Chief Nwafer welcomed him with a broad smile. Your Highness, you honor us again. The honor is mine. After exchanging greetings, Chinedu casually asked, How are the farmers this season? They're doing well. The chief chuckled. Especially the new young woman. Amara? Yes. The chief laughed. I've never seen someone transform abandoned land so quickly. The prince tried to hide his smile. I may visit the farm later. You should. She and Adiz are working there now. Meanwhile, not everyone welcomed the prince's growing interest in Amara. Inside her father's spacious compound, Nkiru sat beneath a mango tree, absent-mindedly weaving palm leaves. Her close friends, Chisholm and Ifeanyi, watched her carefully. You've barely spoken all morning, Chisholm observed. I'm thinking, if it's about the prince. It is. Ifeanyi sighed. Nkiru, there are many handsome men. I don't want many handsome men. I want him. Chisholm exchanged a worried glance with Ifeanyi. Maybe he simply likes the new girl. Kiru's eyes flashed. Then he'll stop. How? She looked toward the distant hills where Amara's farm lay hidden. I'll make sure of it. Neither friend liked the determination in her voice. At the farm, Amara and Adiz had just finished harvesting baskets of fresh vegetables. Adiz admired their work proudly. We should sell these at tomorrow's market. Amara nodded. I think so too. You know. What? I've never earned this much from farming. Amara smiled. It's your hard work. No, it's ours. Before either woman could continue, the sound of approaching footsteps interrupted them. Prince Chinidu appeared carrying a woven basket. Adiz grinned immediately. Your Highness, I thought you came empty-handed. The prince lifted the basket. My mother insisted I bring fresh oranges from the palace orchard. Adiz laughed. So the queen knows you're visiting? Chinidu looked slightly embarrassed. My parents know I enjoy visiting villages. Amara accepted the basket gratefully. Please thank Her Majesty. I will. The three sat beneath the shade of a large mango tree overlooking the farm. For nearly an hour they talked about ordinary things. The weather, farming, village traditions, favorite childhood memories. Amara noticed something unusual. Despite being a prince, Chinidu never dominated conversations. He listened. He laughed easily. He asked questions because he genuinely cared about the answers. At one point he picked up a hoe. May I? Amara raised an eyebrow. You know how to use one? I grew up annoying palace gardeners. She laughed. That's not an answer. It means yes. He demonstrated surprisingly good technique while loosening soil around the pepper plants. Adiz clapped dramatically. Your Highness, you've been hiding talents. He shrugged. My father insisted I understand the work our people do. Amara watched quietly. The prince wasn't pretending. His movements were natural, comfortable. Her respect for him deepened. From behind a cluster of banana trees overlooking the farm, another pair of eyes watched every moment. Kiru. She had followed the prince after seeing him leave the marketplace. Now she watched him laughing with Amara beneath the mango tree, watched him carrying vegetables, watched him helping on the farm. Something inside her twisted painfully. This can't continue, she whispered. She turned and hurried back toward the village. An idea had already begun forming. That evening, while Amara and Adiz prepared vegetable soup over a small fire outside the cottage, several villagers gathered nearby. Baba Okoro cleared his throat. My daughters. Both women looked up. We've been talking. About what? The abandoned western fields. Another elderly farmer stepped forward. No one has cultivated them for years. Adiz nodded. The soil is still good. It is. The old farmer smiled. We wondered. He hesitated. Would you teach us how you restored this land? Amara looked genuinely surprised. Teach you? Yes. We've noticed your methods. You don't waste water. Your planting rows are organized. Your crops are healthier. Another farmer nodded eagerly. We want to learn. Amara felt emotion rise inside her. Her father had always believed knowledge became more valuable when shared. She smiled warmly. I'd be honored. The elderly farmers exchanged delighted smiles. Baba Okoro laughed. I told you she'd agree. Adiz nudged Amara playfully. Look at you. What? You're becoming our village farming teacher. Amara laughed for the first time that day. I still have a lot to learn myself. Far away in Lagos, another search meeting was coming to an end. Mr. Ibrahim Musa stood inside Chief David's former office. The room remained exactly as it had been the day its owner passed away. A private investigator entered quietly. I'm sorry, sir. Nothing. The investigator shook his head. No credit card activity. No phone signal. No hotel reservations. No airline records. It's as though Miss Amara vanished. Mr. Musa looked at David Okeke's photograph on the wall. I know your daughter. He spoke softly, almost as if David could hear him. She isn't running away. She's searching for something. The investigator frowned. Should we continue? Mr. Musa remembered the handwritten letter. Please don't look for me. He sighed deeply. No, not for now. We wait. Back in Umidum village, night settled peacefully across the hills. The stars glittered brilliantly above the little cottage. Amara sat outside after Adiz had gone home, sipping warm tea while listening to the chorus of crickets. For the first time in years, she noticed how beautiful silence could be. No constant ringing phones. No urgent business meetings. No flashing cameras. No reporters. Just nature. She looked across the flourishing farm. Her father had built an agricultural empire worth billions. Yet perhaps his greatest lesson had never been about making money. It had been about remembering the value of honest work. She smiled toward the stars. I think I'm beginning to understand now, Dad. A cool breeze rustled the cassava leaves, carrying with it the comforting scent of fertile soil. Somewhere beyond the darkness, Prince Chinidu rode slowly back toward the palace, unable to stop thinking about the remarkable young woman who had chosen a simple life over comfort. Elsewhere, hidden inside her room, Nkiru stared into the night, jealousy quietly hardening into a dangerous plan. And hundreds of kilometers away in Lagos, an entire corporate empire continued waiting for the return of the billionaire the world believed had disappeared without a trace. None of them knew that the greatest changes in Amara's life were only beginning. The rainy season arrived gently over Umidum village. Each morning, soft mist settled across the hills before the sun slowly chased it away. Tiny drops of water clung to cassava leaves like scattered diamonds, while the rich red soil became darker and more fertile with every passing shower. For the farmers, it was a season of hope. For Amara, it became a season of healing. She had now lived in the village for nearly a month. The grief that had once followed her every waking moment no longer felt as suffocating. She still missed her father every day, but instead of remembering only the hospital room and the funeral, she began remembering his laughter, his jokes, and the countless lessons he had taught her while they worked together on their small family farm many years ago. Every morning before sunrise, she stood outside her little cottage and watched the light spread across the fields. It had become her favorite moment of the day. One particular morning, Adiz arrived carrying 2 woven baskets. I brought breakfast. Amara smiled. You've started spoiling me. Adiz laughed. I found fresh akara at Mama Ngozi's stall. You mean you spent your money again? Adiz shrugged. We'll earn more. She spread a small cloth beneath the mango tree, and the 2 friends sat together eating bean cakes and drinking warm pap. For a while, neither of them spoke. The quiet felt comfortable. Finally, Adiz broke the silence. You smile more now. Amara looked surprised. Do I? A lot more. I suppose I do. I'm happy. Amara looked toward the growing crops surrounding the cottage. So am I. Adiz studied her carefully. I think your father would be happy too. Amara lowered her eyes. I hope so. He would. You've turned sadness into something beautiful. Those words stayed with Amara long after breakfast ended. Later that morning, several elderly farmers gathered beneath the giant Irako tree in the center of the village. As promised, Amara had agreed to show them some of the farming techniques her father had taught her. Nearly 15 people attended. Men, women, even curious teenagers. Old Baba Okoro stood proudly beside her. Our teacher has arrived. The villagers laughed warmly. Amara immediately shook her head. I'm not a teacher. You are today, Baba Okoro insisted. Everyone laughed again. Amara smiled shyly before kneeling beside a small demonstration plot. My father always believed healthy crops begin with healthy soil. She scooped up a handful of earth. This soil is rich, but it becomes even better if we allow it to rest between planting seasons. The villagers listened carefully. She explained simple composting methods using dried leaves, kitchen scraps, and animal manure. She demonstrated proper spacing between cassava stems. She showed them how rainwater could be directed toward vegetable beds instead of being wasted. None of the techniques required expensive equipment. Only patience, care, and planning. An elderly woman raised her hand. My tomatoes always die before harvest. Amara smiled. Can I visit your farm tomorrow? The woman blinked. You would do that? Of course. We'll figure it out together. Another farmer asked about pepper plants. A young boy wanted to know why some yam mounds produced larger harvests than others. Amara answered every question patiently. Prince Chinidu arrived quietly near the end of the lesson. He stood beneath a nearby tree, unnoticed by most of the gathering. He watched the way Amara listened before speaking. She never made anyone feel foolish. Even when correcting mistakes, she did so gently. The prince found himself admiring her more with each passing day. Village chief Nwafer eventually noticed him. Your Highness. The villagers turned immediately. Everyone bowed respectfully. Amara looked surprised. She hadn't realized he was there. I hope I'm not interrupting, Chinidu said. Not at all, Baba Okoro replied. Our teacher was just finishing. Amara laughed. I've told everyone to stop calling me that. It doesn't seem to be working, the prince teased. The villagers laughed. Amara shook her head playfully. I surrender. After the lesson ended, Prince Chinidu offered to help Amara carry a basket of seedlings back to her cottage. She hesitated. I couldn't ask your highness to carry farm supplies. You didn't ask. I offered. You'll make people talk. They already do. Amara laughed despite herself. That is true. Together they walked along the narrow path leading through the fields. For several minutes, they simply enjoyed the peaceful surroundings. Finally, Chinidu spoke. You've changed this village. Amara looked confused. I've only planted vegetables. You've done much more. How? The farmers have hope again. They're sharing ideas. They're helping one another. He smiled. That wasn't happening before you came. Amara looked down thoughtfully. I only shared what my father taught me. Then he must have been an extraordinary man. He was. She smiled softly. The best man I've ever known. The prince remained silent for a moment. I wish I had met him. So do I. Her voice became quiet. He would have liked you. Those simple words made Chinidu's heart beat just a little faster. Unfortunately, not everyone appreciated the growing admiration surrounding Amara. Inside Nkiru's family compound, frustration had begun turning into obsession. She paced back and forth across the courtyard while her mother watched from the veranda. My daughter, what is troubling you? Nothing. Nkiru, I gave birth to you. I know when you're lying. Nkiru stopped walking. It's that new girl. Her mother sighed. Amara? Yes. What has she done? Nothing. Then why are you angry? Because everyone suddenly loves her. Her mother smiled gently. Kindness has a way of attracting people. Nkiru folded her arms. So beauty means nothing now? Her mother looked at her carefully. Beauty matters, but character lasts longer. Nkiru frowned. I don't understand. Her mother walked over and touched her shoulder. When you were little, you would share your food with children who had none. You used to help old women carry firewood. You smiled without expecting anything in return. She sighed. I miss that girl. Nkiru looked away. People change. Yes, they do. Her mother returned quietly to the house. Nkiru remained standing alone beneath the mango tree. For a brief moment, guilt flickered across her face. Then it disappeared. She convinced herself that Amara was the problem, not her. That afternoon, Chisholm and Ifunanya visited Nkiru. The three friends sat beneath the shade discussing the latest village gossip. I heard the prince attended Amara's farming lesson, Ifunanya said carefully. Nkiru's expression immediately darkened. I heard. They say he helped carry her basket. I heard that too. Chisholm hesitated before speaking. Nkiru. What? I think you should let this go. What? The prince. If he likes Amara. He doesn't. You don't know that. I do. He barely knows her. Ifunanya spoke gently. Sometimes people don't need years. Nkiru stood abruptly. You've both chosen her side. No. We're choosing peace. There is no peace. There won't be until she leaves. Both friends exchanged worried glances. Nkiru, what are you planning? She smiled. Nothing serious. The smile made them even more uneasy. The following morning, Amara prepared several baskets of vegetables for the weekly market. Tomatoes, peppers, okra, fresh spinach. Adiz admired the harvest proudly. We'll sell everything. I hope so. We definitely will. They balanced the baskets on their heads and began walking toward the marketplace. Along the way, children greeted Amara enthusiastically. Good morning, teacher. She laughed. Not you too. The children giggled before running away. Adiz nudged her. You've become famous. I'm beginning to regret teaching anyone. No, you're not. No, I'm really not. The marketplace overflowed with activity. Customers crowded every stall. Farmers displayed colorful harvests. Traders negotiated loudly. Amara and Adiz arranged their vegetables neatly on a wooden table. Within minutes, customers began arriving. Your tomatoes look wonderful. They're fresh. I'll take 2 baskets. Another woman pointed toward the peppers. How much? Before long, they had sold nearly half their produce. Several elderly women specifically sought Amara's stall because they trusted the quality of her vegetables. Watching from across the marketplace, Nkiru felt another stab of jealousy. Even the market favored Amara now. She looked toward a group of mischievous young men lounging beneath a tree. One of them, Obina, was known throughout the village for causing trouble whenever someone offered enough money. Nkiru walked toward them. Obina smiled lazily. Nkiru, what brings the village beauty here? I need a favor. His smile widened. I was hoping you'd say that. Meanwhile, business continued briskly at Amara's stall. Adiz counted the growing pile of money with excitement. We've never sold this much. Amara smiled. The harvest was good. No, people trust you. Just then, Prince Chinidu entered the marketplace. As usual, villagers greeted him warmly. His eyes naturally searched for Amara. He found her laughing with Adiz while handing vegetables to an elderly customer. He smiled. Before he could approach, loud shouting erupted nearby. There she is. Several startled shoppers turned. Obina and 3 other young men marched toward Amara's stall. One of them pointed accusingly. That's the woman. Amara looked confused. Excuse me? You stole our money. The marketplace fell silent. Adiz immediately stepped forward. What are you talking about? Obina slammed his palm against the wooden stall. Don't pretend. You came to our compound yesterday. You collected payment for farm supplies. Then disappeared. Amara frowned. I've never met you before. Liar. People began whispering. Some looked uncertain. Others looked suspicious. Prince Chinidu frowned and quickly walked closer. What is happening here? Obina bowed respectfully. Your Highness, this woman stole from us. The prince looked at Amara. She met his eyes calmly. I've never seen these men before today. He turned back toward Obina. Do you have proof? The young man hesitated. For only a second. Then he reached into his pocket. I have witnesses. From the edge of the crowd, Nkiru watched everything unfold. A faint smile appeared on her lips. Her plan had begun. She expected panic. She expected Amara to lose the villagers' trust. She expected the prince to doubt her. Instead, she saw something unexpected. Prince Chinidu never once looked at Amara with suspicion. He looked at her with complete confidence. And for the first time, Nkiru realized that breaking the bond forming between them would be far more difficult than she had imagined. The marketplace held its breath as the accusation hung in the air. Unaware that jealousy had just taken its first dangerous step, Amara stood quietly, determined to defend her honesty. Not with anger, but with the truth. The marketplace fell into an uneasy silence. Only moments earlier, traders had been shouting prices, children had been laughing, and women had been bargaining over baskets of vegetables. Now every conversation had stopped. Dozens of eyes remained fixed on Amara. She stood quietly behind her vegetable stall, her hands resting lightly on the wooden table. Across from her, Obina folded his arms with exaggerated confidence. "You stole our money," he repeated loudly. "I want everyone here to know the truth." A murmur spread through the crowd. "Did she really? I don't believe it. She seems too kind. But why would those boys lie?" People began whispering among themselves. Adiz stepped in front of Amara instinctively. "You should be ashamed of yourselves." Obina laughed. "Adiz, don't interfere." "I will. You know she's innocent." "Do I?" He smirked. "Then prove it." Prince Chinidu walked closer until he stood between both groups. There was nothing intimidating about his posture. His voice remained calm. "No one will accuse another person without evidence." He looked directly at Obina. "You claimed she stole your money." "Yes." "When?" "Yesterday afternoon." "Where?" "Near my father's compound." "What time?" Obina hesitated. Around 3. The prince nodded thoughtfully. "And how much money did she supposedly take?" 50,000 naira. Several villagers exchanged surprised glances. That was a considerable amount. Prince Chinidu continued. "You also said you have witnesses." "I do." He motioned toward two young men standing at the back of the crowd. They reluctantly stepped forward. "Ifani, Uche." The prince recognized both immediately. "I know you." The two young men lowered their eyes respectfully. "Your Highness, were both of you present?" "Yes." Prince Chinidu folded his arms. "Good. Then tell everyone exactly what happened." The two exchanged nervous looks. Neither spoke. The silence lasted several uncomfortable seconds. Finally, Obina cleared his throat. "They're shy." "No," the prince replied evenly. "They're thinking." The crowd grew even quieter. Amara watched everything without saying a word. Her father had often told her that innocent people should never rush to defend themselves with anger. "The truth," he used to say, "doesn't panic." She silently repeated those words now. The prince turned toward the first witness. "Ifani, what color clothes was the woman wearing?" The young man blinked. "I." He looked toward Obina. Obina glared at him. "Answer, His Highness." "I think blue." Prince Chinidu nodded. "And the second witness?" Uche swallowed nervously. "I remember. She wore green." The crowd erupted into quiet murmurs. "They can't even agree." Prince Chinidu raised a hand, asking everyone to remain silent. He looked back at Obina. "Interesting. Would you like to answer?" Obina shifted uneasily. Maybe she changed clothes." A few people chuckled. The prince ignored them. "What exactly was she selling when you met her?" Obina blinked. "Selling? Yes. You said she came to your compound. What was she carrying?" Another pause. "I don't remember." "You don't remember?" "No." Prince Chinidu nodded slowly. "I see." He turned toward Amara. "Where were you yesterday afternoon?" Before she could answer, several elderly women suddenly stepped forward. Mama Ngozi spoke first. "She was here." Another woman nodded. "She helped me choose vegetables." Baba Okoro raised his walking stick. "She visited my farm before noon." And after that, another farmer added, "She came to inspect my tomato plants." "I was with her." "So was I." Within moments, nearly 10 villagers came forward. One after another. Each gave the same account. Amara had spent the entire afternoon helping different farmers across the village. There had been no opportunity for her to visit Obina's compound. The whispers grew louder. Obina's confidence began disappearing. Prince Chinidu looked at him quietly. "Would you like to change your statement?" "No." "I." His voice faltered. "I." Just then another voice interrupted. "My prince." Everyone turned. An elderly widow slowly walked through the crowd. It was Mama Ebra. She carried a walking stick and a small woven basket. "I heard shouting." "What happened?" Someone quickly explained. The old woman frowned. "This young lady?" She pointed toward Amara. "This same girl." Yes. Mama Ebra shook her head firmly. Impossible. She turned toward the crowd. 3 days ago I fainted near the stream. Who carried me home? She pointed at Amara. She did. I couldn't even pay her. Another villager stepped forward. My son was sick. She brought herbs. I offered money. She refused. Another woman added, when my roof collapsed, she spent half the day helping my daughters repair it. I've never seen her ask anyone for money. The atmosphere in the marketplace shifted. People who had doubted Amara moments earlier now looked embarrassed. Prince Chinidu turned once more toward Obina. This is your final opportunity. Tell the truth. Obina lowered his head. Sweat rolled down his forehead despite the cool afternoon breeze. He looked toward the edge of the crowd. His eyes searched desperately, searching for Nkiru, but she was no longer there. The moment she realized the accusation was failing, she had quietly slipped away. Obina realized he had been left alone. His shoulders slumped. I'm sorry. The words barely rose above a whisper. Prince Chinidu remained silent. I lied. The crowd gasped. Obina took a shaky breath. She didn't steal anything. I made it up. The marketplace exploded with shocked voices. You lied. Why? How could you do such a thing? The prince lifted his hand again. The crowd gradually became quiet. Why? Obina swallowed hard. I was paid. A stunned silence followed. Paid? By who? Obina looked down at the ground. I can't say. Prince Chinidu's voice became firmer. If someone hired you to destroy an innocent person's reputation, protecting them makes you equally responsible. Obina closed his eyes. For a long moment nobody spoke. Finally he whispered, Nkiru. The name spread through the crowd like wildfire. Nkiru? The merchant's daughter? I can't believe it. Several women covered their mouths in disbelief. Adiz stared in shock. I knew she disliked Amara. I never imagined this. Prince Chinidu's expression hardened. He had hoped the rivalry between the two women was nothing more than jealousy. Now it had become something far more serious. He looked toward the direction of Nkiru's compound. His disappointment was obvious. Baba Okoro sighed deeply. Beauty without honesty becomes a curse. Several elders nodded quietly. Meanwhile, Amara simply stood there. She did not celebrate. She did not smile. She did not mock anyone. Instead, she slowly walked toward Obina. The young man looked up fearfully. I'm sorry, he whispered. I shouldn't have done it. Amara studied him for a moment. My father taught me something. Obina remained silent. He said desperate people sometimes make terrible decisions. She paused. But every terrible decision begins with one small choice. Tears filled Obina's eyes. I needed money. I know. But next time, earn it honestly. The kindness in her voice made him lower his head in shame. I will. I promise. Prince Chinidu watched the exchange in quiet amazement. Most people would have demanded punishment. Most would have humiliated the young man in front of everyone. Amara chose mercy. Again, the prince smiled to himself. She continued proving that her character was even more beautiful than he had first believed. Village Chief Nwafer stepped forward. Obina, you will apologize publicly to Miss Amara. The young man nodded immediately. He turned toward her. I'm sorry. I lied. I damaged your name. I hope someday you can forgive me. Amara gave a small nod. I forgive you. The crowd fell silent once more. Some were surprised. Others were deeply moved. The chief smiled. Our village has learned something important today. He looked around at everyone gathered. A person's reputation is easier to destroy than to rebuild. That is why we must seek truth before believing rumors. The villagers nodded thoughtfully. One by one, customers returned to Amara's stall. This time, not only to buy vegetables. Many came simply to apologize for doubting her. By sunset, every basket on her table had been sold. As Amara and Adiz packed the empty baskets together, Adiz smiled. You know. What? I think half the village loves you now. Amara laughed softly. I'd settle for them buying vegetables. Prince Chinedu chuckled. I suspect they'll continue doing both. The three shared a laugh. None of them noticed that from the shadows beyond the marketplace, Nkiru watched silently. Her plan had failed. Instead of destroying Amara's reputation, she had made the entire village admire her even more. For the first time, Nkiru realized she wasn't simply competing against another beautiful woman. She was competing against a heart so genuine that every attempt to bring it down only caused it to shine brighter. And deep inside, jealousy began whispering that if lies could not separate Amara from the prince, then something much more dangerous would have to. The events at the marketplace became the only topic anyone discussed in Umidam village. For days afterward, every conversation eventually found its way back to Amara. Women talked about her while fetching water from the stream. Farmers mentioned her name as they worked their fields. Children repeated the story with dramatic exaggeration, pretending to be Prince Chinedu questioning Obina before bursting into laughter. What surprised everyone most was not that Amara had been proven innocent. It was what she did afterward. She had forgiven Obina. Many people admitted they would not have done the same. That girl has a different spirit, Mama Ngozi remarked one morning while arranging vegetables at her roadside stall. Old Baba Okoro nodded in agreement. Anger would have been easier, but she chose mercy. The elderly woman smiled. Her parents raised her well. Not far away, Amara was completely unaware of the growing admiration surrounding her. She stood in her little garden, carefully tying tomato vines to small wooden stakes, while humming a song her father used to sing during planting season. Adiz arrived carrying a basket filled with cassava cuttings. You've started singing again. Amara laughed. Was I? You were. I haven't heard you sing since you came. Amara smiled thoughtfully. My father loved this song. She quietly continued tying the plants. I think remembering him hurts less now. Adiz set down her basket. I've noticed. I still miss him. I always will. But now, she looked toward the blue morning sky. I remember his smile before I remember the hospital. Adiz gently squeezed her shoulder. I think that's healing. Amara nodded. I think so too. The two women spent the rest of the morning working together. As they harvested peppers, Adiz suddenly spoke. Can I ask you something? Of course. Back in Lagos. Amara looked up. You've never spoken much about your life there. Amara hesitated. She knew this question would eventually come. I wasn't very happy. Adiz frowned. I thought city life was exciting. It can be. So why leave? Amara carefully picked another ripe pepper before answering. Sometimes the busiest places are the loneliest. Adiz thought about that. I don't think I understand. My father was everything to me. When he died, her voice caught. I couldn't breathe inside that house anymore. So I came here, to remember who we used to be. Adiz smiled softly. I think your father led you here. Amara looked down. Maybe. She still couldn't bring herself to reveal the truth. Not yet. She feared that if Adiz discovered she was a billionaire, everything would change. She didn't want admiration. She wanted friendship. Real friendship. The kind that existed before people knew how much money she had. Meanwhile, Prince Chinedu sat beneath a large oak tree inside the palace gardens with his father, King Obiora. Several servants quietly poured tea before excusing themselves. The king watched his son with amusement. You've visited Umidam village 6 times this month. Chinedu smiled. Have I? I counted. The prince laughed. I didn't realize. You realize. The king sipped his tea. So, what is her name? Chinedu nearly choked on his drink. Father, I'm old, not blind. The prince shook his head. Her name is Amara. King Obiora nodded thoughtfully. And what? What does she do? She's a farmer. The king smiled. You sound proud. I am. You've never spoken about anyone like this. Chinedu looked toward the distant mountains. She's different. In what way? She doesn't know I'm a prince when we first met. You told me that. When she discovered the truth, nothing changed. She still speaks to me exactly the same way. King Obiora chuckled. That's usually a good sign. She doesn't care about titles or wealth. The old king leaned back. Those are rare qualities. The prince became quiet. I've never met someone so genuine. King Obiora looked carefully at his son. Do you love her? The question lingered in the air. After a long silence, Chinedu answered honestly. I'm beginning to. Far across the village, another heart was moving in the opposite direction. Hiru sat alone inside her room. She hadn't attended the marketplace since the incident. Embarrassment kept her hidden. Her father, Chief Ease, entered quietly. My daughter. She didn't answer. I heard what happened. Still silence. He pulled up a wooden chair. You paid those boys? Kiru lowered her head. Yes. Why? I wanted her gone. Chief Ease sighed deeply. Is this really about the prince? She nodded slowly. I've never been ignored before. Her father smiled sadly. Then perhaps life is teaching you something. She looked up sharply. You always take everyone else's side. No. I'm taking the side of truth. He paused. When your mother and I married, I wasn't the richest man. I wasn't the most handsome. So why did she choose you? Because she said my heart made her feel safe. He looked directly into his daughter's eyes. No one builds a lasting marriage with beauty alone. Kiru looked away. I don't want advice. I want the prince. Her father's shoulders slumped. He realized she wasn't ready to listen. The following Saturday, the village prepared for its monthly community work. Every household participated. Men repaired roads. Women cleared drainage paths. Young people planted trees around the village square. Amara and Adiz joined everyone before sunrise. Without being asked, Amara picked up a shovel and began clearing blocked gutters. Her clothes quickly became muddy. Sweat rolled down her forehead. She never complained. Prince Chinedu arrived shortly afterward. Ignoring the surprised looks of several royal guards, he accepted a shovel himself. If they're working, he smiled. So am I. The guards exchanged helpless glances before reluctantly joining him. Soon laughter echoed across the work site. Villagers smiled as they watched their prince digging drainage channels beside ordinary farmers. During a short break, Amara sat beneath the large mango tree near the village square, drinking water from a calabash. Prince Chinedu walked over carrying another. I thought you might need more. She accepted it gratefully. Thank you. You've worked harder than anyone today. I enjoy it. I can see that. A gentle silence settled between them. The sounds of children playing drifted through the warm afternoon air. Finally, Chinedu spoke. May I ask you something? You may. What makes you happy? Amara looked surprised. That's an unusual question. I know. She thought carefully before answering. My father once told me happiness isn't something you chase. It's something you build. So, she looked around the village. Helping people. Growing food. Watching seeds become harvest. Sharing meals. She smiled. Simple things. The prince listened quietly. Then he smiled. I think we were taught by similar fathers. She laughed softly. Maybe. After another brief silence, he looked at her. I'm grateful we met. So am I. He hesitated. I don't know where life will take either of us. But I hope we remain part of each other's journey. Amara felt warmth spread across her cheeks. I hope so too. Neither noticed Adiz smiling from a distance. She quietly whispered to herself, It's about time. That evening, Adiz prepared dinner at Amara's cottage. As they ate, she could no longer keep her thoughts to herself. So, Amara looked up. So, how long are you planning to pretend you don't know the prince likes you? Amara nearly dropped her spoon. What? Adiz laughed loudly. Oh please. The entire village knows. They do not. They absolutely do. Amara covered her face with both hands. I don't even know him that well. You know enough. He respects you. He listens to you. He smiles differently around you. Amara laughed nervously. You're imagining things. I've lived 22 years. I know what admiration looks like. Amara remained silent. Deep inside, she couldn't deny that she looked forward to every conversation with Prince Chinidu. His kindness reminded her of her father. His humility made her forget he was royalty. Most of all, he never treated her like someone he wanted to impress. He treated her like someone he genuinely wanted to know. Later that night, Prince Chinidu stood alone on the palace balcony. The moon hung brightly above the hills surrounding Umadam village. His father's words echoed inside his mind. Do you love her? He smiled to himself. Perhaps it was too early to call it love. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Every journey to the village became the best part of his week. Every conversation with Amara left him wanting another. Every act of kindness she performed made him admire her even more. He had met queens, diplomats, businesswomen, princesses from neighboring kingdoms. Yet none of them had touched his heart the way a humble young farmer living in a tiny cottage had. Far below the palace hill, beneath the same moonlit sky, Amara stood outside her little home looking toward the stars. She thought about her father, about Adiz, about the peaceful life she had built. Then, unexpectedly, she thought about Prince Chinidu. A small smile appeared on her face before she even realized it. Neither of them knew what the future held. Neither knew that hidden truths, old enemies, and $1 billion secret still waited to change everything. But beneath the same Enugu sky, two hearts had quietly begun walking toward one another, one gentle conversation at a time. A month had passed since Amara first arrived in Umadam village with nothing more than a small travel bag and a broken heart. The abandoned farm that had once been covered in weeds had become one of the healthiest pieces of farmland in the community. Rows of tomatoes glowed bright red beneath the morning sun. Healthy pepper plants stretched neatly across carefully prepared beds. The cassava fields swayed gently whenever the breeze swept across the valley. People who had once laughed at the newcomer now stopped to admire her work. Every morning, someone visited her cottage. Sometimes it was an elderly farmer asking for advice. Sometimes it was a widow needing help carrying firewood. Other times, it was children bringing her wildflowers they had picked along the stream. Without realizing it, Amara had become part of the village. One cool Monday morning, she stepped outside her cottage just as the first rays of sunlight touched the hills. She stretched her arms and breathed deeply. The scent of wet earth filled the air after a night of gentle rain. She smiled. No expensive perfume she had ever owned in Lagos smelled as comforting as fresh soil after rainfall. A familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. You woke up before me today. Amara turned and laughed. Adiz walked through the wooden gate carrying a covered clay pot balanced carefully on her head. I've been awake for almost an hour. I don't believe you. You never do. Adiz lowered the pot onto a wooden bench. I brought breakfast. Amara peeked beneath the cover. Steaming yam porridge. Her eyes widened. You cooked all this? I had help. Who? My neighbor insisted on adding smoked fish. Amara smiled warmly. Tell her thank you. I already did. The two friends sat beneath the old mango tree that shaded the front of the cottage. As they ate together, Adiz suddenly looked thoughtful. You know. When you first came here, I thought you'd leave after a few days. So did I. But now. Adiz looked around the flourishing farm. I can't imagine this village without you. Amara felt unexpected emotion rise inside her. I never imagined I'd feel at home again. You do now. She nodded slowly. I do. After breakfast, the two women walked toward the western side of the village. Several farmers had invited Amara to inspect newly planted vegetable fields. Along the way, almost everyone greeted her. Good morning, Amara. Morning, my daughter. Teacher, come and see my tomatoes later. Children ran toward her carrying tiny baskets. Look, they've started growing. Amara knelt beside them and examined several young maize plants. They're beautiful. A little boy frowned. But this one is smaller. She gently loosened the soil around the weakest plant. It needs room. And a little patience. The boy smiled. I'll take care of it. I know you will. As they continued walking, Adiz quietly laughed. What? You know every child's name. I've been trying. No. You've succeeded. Amara looked around the village. Perhaps she had. The realization made her heart unexpectedly full. Meanwhile, inside the royal palace, Queen Gozi watched her son from across the breakfast table. Prince Chinidu had barely touched his meal. Instead, he stared absent-mindedly through the open window. She smiled knowingly. My son. He looked up. Yes, mother? You're somewhere else. He laughed softly. Was it that obvious? It has been obvious for weeks. King Obiora chuckled behind his morning newspaper. I've been telling him the same thing. Chinidu shook his head with embarrassment. You two enjoy teasing me. The queen reached across the table and gently patted his hand. We tease you because we've never seen you like this. He looked curious. Like what? Happy. I've always been happy. No. His mother smiled kindly. You've always been responsible. There's a difference. The king folded his newspaper. So, when are you bringing this mysterious young woman to meet us? Chinidu nearly spilled his tea. Father. What? You've spoken about her almost every evening. I have not. The queen laughed. You certainly have. He rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. I don't even know if she... He stopped himself. If she what? If she feels the same way. King Obiora leaned back in his chair. The only way to know is to ask. That afternoon, Prince Chinidu rode to Umadam village once again. This time, he carried several young mango seedlings tied carefully to the back of his horse. When he reached Amara's farm, he found her helping 3 elderly women build simple bamboo supports for climbing beans. She looked up and smiled. Your Highness, I brought something. He untied the bundle from his horse. Mango seedlings? He nodded. The palace nursery had extra. I remembered you mentioning that you'd like more fruit trees. Amara looked genuinely touched. You remembered. I remember most things you tell me. Adiz, who had been carrying bamboo poles nearby, exchanged an amused glance with one of the elderly women. Neither said a word, but both smiled. The prince rolled up his sleeves. Where shall we plant them? Amara laughed. You really don't intend to stand around giving royal instructions, do you? I thought I'd earned promotion from visitor to farm assistant. You've certainly earned something. What? A blister. Everyone laughed. Soon the small group worked side by side beneath the warm afternoon sun. No one cared that one of them was a prince. No one treated him differently. He seemed to prefer it that way. As they finished planting the final seedling, an elderly woman named Mama Nena smiled warmly. She looked first at Chinidu, then at Amara. Finally, she nodded to herself. What? Adiz asked curiously. I was just thinking. What were you thinking? The old woman grinned. These mango trees will live for many years. They'll give fruit long after we're gone. She looked directly at Amara and Chinidu. Some friendships are planted exactly the same way. Both young people looked away at almost the same moment. Adiz covered her mouth to hide her laughter. Even the prince couldn't stop smiling. Not everyone appreciated the growing closeness between them. Standing near the edge of the road, hidden behind thick bushes, Nkiru watched silently. She had seen the prince arrive carrying seedlings. She had watched them laughing together. She had watched the villagers smiling at the pair. Bitterness settled deeper inside her heart. He smiles at her. The way men should smile at me. One of her friends, Chisholm, had followed her. Nkiru, this has gone too far. No, it hasn't gone far enough. You need to stop. I won't. Chisholm sighed. You've changed. Nkiru looked at her coldly. No, I've simply decided not to lose. She turned and walked away before Chisholm could answer. For the first time since their childhood, Chisholm felt afraid for her friend. That evening, the village square filled with laughter. The elders had organized a small storytelling gathering for the children. Families sat on woven mats beneath lanterns hung from tree branches. Amara arrived with Adiz carrying roasted corn for everyone to share. Prince Chinidu joined them a few minutes later, sitting among the children instead of with the village chiefs. An elderly storyteller began recounting an old Igbo folktale about a tortoise who believed riches were more valuable than kindness. The children listened with wide eyes. When the story ended, the old man smiled. "What have we learned?" Tiny hands shot into the air. One little girl answered proudly, "Money cannot buy a good heart." The old storyteller nodded. Exactly. Without realizing it, Amara felt tears gathering in her eyes. Those words reminded her so much of her father. She lowered her head. Prince Chinidu noticed. Quietly, without drawing attention, he offered her a clean handkerchief. She accepted it with a grateful smile. "Thank you. You don't have to say anything." She nodded. He understood. Some wounds did not need explanations. Later, after everyone began walking home, Prince Chinidu offered to accompany Amara back to her cottage. The moon hung low above the hills, bathing the narrow footpath in silver light. Crickets chirped softly from the surrounding grass. Neither of them hurried. "I've been thinking," Chinidu said. "Dangerous." He laughed. "So I've been told." She smiled. "I enjoy talking with you." "So do I. I've met many people, but very few make me feel peaceful." Amara looked ahead quietly. "I know what you mean." He stopped walking. "So you do?" She turned toward him. "Yes." For a moment, neither spoke. The night seemed unusually still. Finally, Chinidu smiled. "I'm glad we met." Amara returned the smile. "I think my father would have said we met for a reason." "And what reason would that be?" She looked toward the stars. "Perhaps to remind each other that life can begin again." The prince looked at her with quiet admiration. "I think he would have been a wise man." He was. When they reached the gate of her little cottage, they paused. Neither seemed eager for the evening to end. "Good night, Amara." "Good night, Your Highness." "You've started calling me that again." She laughed. "I suppose I have. I prefer Chinidu." She smiled. Then, "Good night, Chinidu." His smile widened. "Good night." As he walked away beneath the moonlight, Amara watched until he disappeared beyond the bend in the road. She rested one hand against the wooden gate and smiled to herself. For the first time since losing her father, her heart no longer felt defined only by grief. It was slowly making room for hope. Far away in Lagos, however, another chapter of her life was preparing to catch up with her. Inside the headquarters of Okeke Agricultural Holdings, Chairman Ibrahim Musa stared at a newly delivered investigative report. One page had been marked with a red tab. At the bottom, a single line caught his attention. Possible lead. A young woman matching Miss Amara Okeke's description has reportedly been seen living in a farming community near Enugu. Mr. Musa slowly closed the file. After weeks of searching, someone had finally found the first real clue. The peaceful life Amara had built in Umidam village was about to face the one thing she had been trying to escape: her past. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel and tell us where you are watching from.